Hey, just want to make a quick disclaimer here. So the intention with this video was to get it out before Shadow Generations released, but due to me being lazy and also way overestimating how long it would take to make this video is coming out after Shadow Generations. So there's not too much of this video is really affected by that. There's some stuff that I say about like the game and like the current state of Sonic the Hedgehog that, doesn't really include Shadow Generations because at the time of me recording these lines, Shadow Generations wasn't out yet. I've tried to make amends with that by adding some new lines and cutting out some old stuff, but you're just gonna have to live with it. Also, some of these lines are a good, couple months apart, so if you notice, anything different in the audio, that's why. Just try to ignore it. Although, me pointing it out has probably made that more difficult to do. Anyways, enjoy the video. Today marks the release of the newest Sonic the Hedgehog TV series, Sonic Prime. It's crazy to think that not even a year ago, I knew next to nothing about Sonic the Hedgehog. I knew it was a thing, and I even watched the first Sonic movie when it came out, but it wasn't until the second Sonic movie that I decided to really get into the franchise. Honestly, if it weren't for those two movies, I don't know if I would even be a Sonic fan. I watched the first one in theaters, and it instantly became one of my favorite movies in recent history. Then, in the build-up to the second Sonic movie, I started getting recommended character analysis videos for different Sonic characters from people like the PJ Show and A the Boy, and I watched all of them. The way they described these characters made them feel so cool, and really made me wonder if this was a franchise I was sleeping on. Then I watched Sonic Movie 2, and yeah, I need to go play these games. So I got my hands on any games I could and watched every show there was that wasn't Adventures of or Underground. And I gotta say, I enjoyed my time. Not every game was a hit, same with the shows, but I can safely say now that I'm a fan. Now I look forward to whatever new content comes out for this franchise, and boy was I in for a treat. Not only did a new game come out this year, but a new classic games collection, which is how I played the first Sonic games. And on top of that, we were getting a brand new Sonic TV show. Gotta say, I'm pretty excited. Since I won't be getting Sonic Frontiers until Christmas, Sonic Prime is going to be the newest adventure that I'll get to embark on with Sonic & Co. From what I've seen in the trailers and marketing, this looks like it's going to be more catered to kids, which I don't mind. As long as it's fun and exciting, I'm down. Speaking of, the show's on Netflix. Better go watch it and see what it has in store for the particular hedgehog and his friends. What adventures will they go on? What kind of people will they meet? What obstacles will they have to face? Well, I guess there's only one way to find out. Well, that was a show. I gotta say though, 2022 was kind of a perfect year to get into Sonic. New movie, new game, new re-release of the classic games, and a new show? That's a lot to get in 1 year, especially compared to the last 5 years where fans would be lucky to get anything at all. Not to mention most of it was pretty good. All except for Sonic Prime. It's funny, at first I agree with everyone else that the show was great, but even then I felt that deep down there was something wrong with the show. But I brushed it off because I was expecting the rest of the episodes to be a lot better. But no, it actually got worse. I came out of season 2 feeling disappointed with how the show chose to throw away any good ideas it had in favor of mindless action. I get that it's a kid's show, but oh my gosh, I did not expect him to fumble the bag so hard. It was at this point that I knew I had to make a video critiquing the show, but I wanted to wait until the show was finished so I could give my final thoughts. And so here we are, 8 months after the show's over. Honestly, I wasn't expecting this video to take so long to make. I guess I was just kinda lazy, but then again, I also had a lot to say, in case you couldn't tell from how long this video is. For those of you who were wondering why it took so long to upload the FNAF and Bendy ranking videos, this is why. Before I get into the actual video, I want to first put out some disclaimers. First off, to the Sonic Prime fans, if you like Sonic Prime and genuinely think it's a good or even great show, that's completely fine. Don't let what I say about the show affect your enjoyment of it. What I am hoping is that you watch the video through and hear out what I have to say, then evaluate the things I said and come to your own conclusion. Secondly, there's the whole "it's for kids" argument. I'm aware that this show isn't necessarily made for people my age, but that doesn't absolve the show of any criticism. Why is there this assumption that companies don't have to put that much care into making their product good if it's for kids? Don't kids deserve better? I can say from memory that the things that I watched as a kid influenced me into the person I am today. Well-written kids shows can teach important life lessons, introduce them to real-world problems and situations, and create characters and storylines that can stand the test of time. They don't talk down to kids and aren't afraid to introduce them to more mature subjects because they know kids can handle it. Some of the shows that I can think of from my childhood that match this description are Transformers Prime, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, The Batman, Justice League, Young Justice, and Batman the Animated Series. Shows that are able to hold up years later and still be enjoyed even when you're all grown up. Well, not every kids show has to be like that. What do you mean you don't want kids shows to be good? Or are you just admitting that shows like Sonic Prime are bad then? This argument doesn't defend the show and it's just wrong. Just because kids have lower standards for entertainment doesn't mean shows shouldn't try to be better. Also, Sonic Prime clearly isn't trying to be a run-of-the-mill kids show. There's an attempt to tell a semi-serious story with real stakes, character drama, and a tone that harkens back to the older 3D games, where it's not necessarily dark, but it's enough to be serious. Scenes like Sonic being distraught after seeing what are essentially ghosts of his friends, or Sonic and Nine's conflict, the entire concept of New York, Shadow. You don't put stuff like that into a kiddie show for babies. If this was just some mindless action cartoon that wasn't trying to be anything more, then I wouldn't care. But Sonic Prime wants to be a story-driven adventure, so I will be judging it on those merits. Plus, that statement of the show only being for kids isn't even true because of the marketing for Sonic Prime targeting fans, like putting in references to the older games and making the show canon. Kids don't care if the show is canon, they just want to see Sonic do cool stuff. So there's clearly a conscious effort to get older fans to watch this show. Yet, the showrunners never considered if maybe the dumbed-down writing would not be something that fans, most of which are in their 20s to 30s, would be willing to sign up for. So no, Sonic Prime being a kids show does not excuse it from the same critiques that would be given to other media. I understand the show not appealing to someone like me, an adult, isn't really that big of a problem. But writing is writing, and good writing shouldn't be primarily exclusive to older audiences. Kids deserve better. Finally, there will be heavy spoilers in this video. Even though I feel most of you watching have probably already seen the show, for the small chance that one of you haven't seen Sonic Prime and you want to check it out, just know that you will be spoiled on a lot of the show's plot, especially the finale. But with all that out of the way, let's get into the faults of Sonic Prime's writing. But first, a quick recap of the show's story is in order. Sonic Prime begins with Sonic and his friends, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, and Rouge, fighting Eggman over a mystical gem called the Paradox Prism, which is said to be able to shape reality into whatever the user desires. Sonic, in an attempt to stop Eggman from having it, smashes the Paradox Prism and shatters it into pieces, with reality along with it. The shards of the prism end up creating new realities of Sonic's home called Shatter Spaces, where alternate versions of Sonic's friends live. In particular, he finds himself in New York, a doomed future where a group of Eggmen called the Chaos Council ruled the city with an iron fist. Sonic spends the first season trying to figure out what's going on and trying to find a way back home. Along the way, he comes across different versions of his friends. In particular, he meets Nine, an emo version of Tails who grew up without Sonic. In Season 2, Sonic comes across Shadow, who takes him to Ghost Hill, a dead version of Green Hill where the only inhabitants are ghost-like memories of Sonic's friends. It's here Sonic and Shadow come up with the plan to collect all the shards and bring them back to Ghost Hill and restore the Paradox Prism. The Chaos Council also learns of these shards and wish to gather them in order so that they can have enough power to rule the Shatterverse. So it becomes a race to see who can get the shards first. While on this mission, Sonic teams up with Nine again, and together, they bring all the shards back to Ghost Hill. However, it's revealed that Nine kept one of the shards from Sonic, so that he can make the prism in another shatter space called the Grim. 9 assumed they were both going to use the complete prism to create a new world in the Grim, but Sonic wanted to use its power to bring back his world. 9, feeling betrayed by Sonic, takes all the shards for himself. Now, with all the shards, 9 completes the Paradox Prism and begins terraforming the Grim, all while the Shatterverse starts breaking down. Sonic gathers all the friends he made in the other Shatter Spaces, including the Chaos Council, who've made a temporary alliance with Sonic, and together, they all go to the Grim. The rest of Season 3 becomes a fight to not only save the Shatter Spaces, but reality itself. So before I get into the meat and potatoes of this video, I first want to give my general thoughts on this series as a whole. To start off with some positives, the animation in this show is fantastic. I love the use of squash and stretch and how snappy the movements feel. I also love how expressive all the characters are. The team really took advantage of the fact that these are cartoon characters and went all out when posing and expressing them. The fight choreography and cinematography are also really great. This is the first Sonic show where I can confidently say that it has good action. You think it wouldn't take 30 years, but a dub is a dub. I think I can speak for most people that we would want to see a fully 2D animated series in the future, but if the next Sonic show has to be 3D, I would hire these guys back on, or at least do something similar to what they did. Another thing worthy of praise is the cast. Due to Canadian labor laws, the current game voice actors were not able to prize their roles for the show, and instead, new Canadian talent was brought on specifically for Sonic Prime. Well, I'm kind of glad they did, because these are some of my favorite takes on the characters. Special props to Devin Mack, the voice of Sonic. Since I only just got into the Sonic franchise, I haven't really had time to become accustomed to any of the voice actors, so whenever I hear Sonic's voice in my head, it's sort of a vague mismatch of Sonic voices. So the fact that Devin Mack was able to perfectly embody that voice is incredible. He doesn't just sound like he's trying to do an impression of Sonic, he just is Sonic. And the amount of range he's able to give makes Sonic sound more like a real person. He isn't just doing the Sonic voice, but he's really giving it his all. The other cast do a good job as well. I love Ian Hanlon's take on Shadow. He doesn't try to go over the top with the edginess and just gives us a serious but level-headed take on the character. He also does a spot-on voice for Big. Legend. Vincent Tom as Renegade Knucks is also pretty good. Knuckles having a raspy Brooklyn accent is something I wouldn't expect out of a performance of the character, but it works. Funnily enough, he also voices quite a few of the Chaos Council, including Dr. Deep, Dr. Don't, and Dr. Babbles. Yes, Knux and the baby are voiced by the same guy. You actually can't unhear it after realizing they're all the same. Like, Dr. Deep and Knux sound almost identical. I could keep going, but I think you get the point. They're all good. Even if I'm not a big fan of the direction of the voice, the acting is almost always good. What else? I like how pretty the show looks. Green Hill especially looks beautiful. Ironically, despite how overused Green Hill is in modern Sonic, this is actually the first time we're seeing it in a TV show, so that's pretty neat. Although I don't get why it's held on such a high pedestal in the show, they literally refer to Sonic's world as Green Hill. Like, I get it, it's one of the most iconic stages in the series, but you don't have to butter it up like that. But back to the visuals for a second, I like how every Shatter Space has a color theme based off of the colored shard that's in that world. New York's shard is red, so a lot of the city is colored in different reds, oranges, and yellows. While a place like Boss Cage Maze is covered in all this thick greenery, and its shard is also coincidentally green. It's nothing groundbreaking when it comes to visuals or anything, but it's still neat. Although I do kind of wish that they went a little further with the whole Shatter concept. Having the multiverse be a Shatterverse instead feels so deliberate, yet the worlds don't really play into it all that much. Making everything look more jagged and translucent to look more like the shards would have added some extra flair to these worlds, but that's just a pet peeve of mine. The soundtrack was really nice. I'm usually not looking out for music in movies and shows. It's kind of meant to enhance a scene and not steal the spotlight. But I liked how each Shatter Space has music that goes along with the setting. New York has a lot of industrial music mixed with punk rock guitar. Boss Cage Maze is more primitive and tribal. And No Place has some orchestral music that I dare say rivals the Sonic movies. Yeah, I said it. And I genuinely think the end credits theme is slept on. But yeah, that's pretty much everything I liked about the show. Now let's talk about the seasons themselves. I think Season 1 is easily the best one. Because it has to set up the show's worlds and characters, Season 1 has quite a bit of variety. Plus, the pacing isn't too bad in this season. There are still places where the plot drags, but overall, things are moving. I think they also introduced most of the characters in the Shattered Spaces fairly well, with moments like Nine's first talk with Sonic and Thorn's character arc being highlights for me. They don't introduce the Shattered Spaces that well, but there's good ideas here that could be built off of and improved in the later seasons. Too bad that doesn't happen. A lot of people say that Season 2 is the best season, and I just don't get it. I think it's actually worse than Season 1. Simply put, nothing happens in this season. Or, I guess things do happen, but I just don't care. Most of the characters either become boring or annoying, or they just stay boring and annoying. And as a result, there isn't really anyone that I root for, because I don't like anybody. The pacing is also much worse. You can tell they were trying to stretch this out for as long as they could. For the record, I've watched through Sonic Prime 3 times. The first time was on my own, the second time was with my brothers, and the third time was for this video, which I decided to put down some notes for in case I forgot some things. While I was watching, there would genuinely just be several episodes in a row where I just didn't have anything to write down because, again, nothing of note happens. You want to complain about Season 1 being repetitive? 75% of this show is fighting over the prism shards. Literally nothing else happens. I'm pretty sure halfway through watching Season 1, I started pausing to see how much time was left, only to find out I was merely halfway through the episode. Sometimes it was even worse than that. I remember distinctly pausing on the Season 2 finale, expecting to be almost done, only to find out that I was 8 minutes into the episode. I was so mad. A lot of the plot points and character motivations felt really contrived in this season as well. Granted, the same goes for Season 1, but it's far more noticeable here. Shadow somehow knows about Nine and his tech and fights Sonic over it, even though he can only see Sonic when he's running super fast, and in this scene he's standing completely still. Or how Nine just pulls a Deus Ex Machina and gives Sonic the ability to touch the shards through a robot. Or what about when Dredd somehow convinces all the pirates that Sonic betrayed them, even though he came back with the shard? And later, all it takes to change their minds is Sonic helping them deal with the Egg Forcers.
What?
You see what I mean? Stuff just kind of happens and you're expected to go with the flow. Now that isn't to say that there aren't any cool moments. The fight with Shadow, the interactions with Sonic and Nine, and the new prismatic form are all highlights, but those moments are few and far between in an otherwise mediocre season. And Season 3 is genuinely terrible. Do I even need to explain why this season is so bad? Oh, I know, let's have the final battle repeat for 3 full episodes. That definitely won't get tiring or irritating. And the ending is so rushed, it felt like an afterthought. Overall, the show is just really boring. You can tell that this premise doesn't work for a full show. At most, this would have been far better if it had been cut down to 13 episodes, because as it stands, this concept feels really drawn out. Although I don't think making the show shorter would really make it all that much better, the writing is so amateur that no amount of cutting would save this. The problems of Sonic Prime are rooted deep in the show's core identity and what it sets out to do. So let's get into it. It's finally time we get into the nitty-gritty and find out how Sonic Prime as a story fails on a fundamental level. The first point of contention would have to be the multiversal aspect of the show, considering that it's, well, a multiverse story. To me, the basics for making a good multiverse story is to take what audiences are familiar with and flip it on its head to give us something different from the norm. It's what makes multiverse or alternate timeline stories so appealing. So how does Sonic Prime handle this concept? Very poorly. The first problem is a lack of setup. The show just jumps straight into the action, giving us no time to become familiar with Sonic, his friends, or their home. Without a proper feel for who these characters are or the world they live in, you create nothing but apathy from the audience. After all, if I don't know who any of these people are, why should I care what happens to them? Now I know what some of you might be saying, Run Kids TV, I know who these characters are, and I care. When writing for a pre-existing IP like Sonic, you have to consider the fact that there are going to be people watching your show who might not be familiar with the franchise. Of course you, as a Sonic fan, know who these characters are, but this is a show that's meant to be accessible to both old and new Sonic fans alike. and I just don't think it does a good job at introducing Sonic the Hedgehog to new fans. Take Tails, for example. With just this show, what do we know about him? Well, he's smart for one. He was quickly able to find out that Eggman was setting a trap for Sonic. He's also really good with technology, as he not only has a few gadgets of his own, but is even able to identify what other technology is, like Eggman's speed amplifier, and how it works. So, Tails is smart and a bit of a tech whiz. What else? Well, unfortunately, that's all the show gives you. We're told through dialogue that Sonic and Tails are best buds, but we never actually see that dynamic on display. Sonic and Tails only interact directly with each other 2 times in the entire show, and both times it's just for Tails to give some exposition. So we're left with a character that isn't really a character at all. Rather, he's simply the smart sidekick, and that's it. And this becomes a problem when the show's investment relies on you wanting Sonic to save these characters. Sonic's whole goal in the show is to gather all the shard pieces and restore the Paradox Prism in order to restore Green Hill and his friends. So I find it rather odd how little time is actually spent getting to know Green Hill and getting to know Sonic's friends. You know, giving us a reason to actually care. And all the Prime characters are like this. It isn't just Tails. Amy, Knuckles, Rouge, they're all about as interesting as a piece of cardboard. And Green Hill just looks pretty. I can't imagine anyone watching this show who isn't already familiar with the Sonic brand and finding these characters remotely interesting. And that's because the show doesn't spend enough time introducing these characters and prefers to get right into the good stuff. Well, let's take a look and see what Sonic Prime has to offer then with its multiverse premise. Are the worlds creative and unique? No. Despite the limitless potential a multiverse story could have, Sonic Prime chooses to play it as safe as possible by giving us the most basic worlds you could think of. Oh look, it's Sonic, but pirates! Oh look, it's Sonic, but it's a cyberpunk-inspired dystopian future. Oh look, it's Sonic, but they live in the jungle. Was this the best they could come up with? How about a futuristic city where all the characters are instead robots? And maybe you could take some inspiration from Underground and have all the characters fight with musical instruments. Or maybe we could have a shonen-inspired world where Sonic's friends are part of an elite team of warriors with mystical weapons who fight robots similar to those from Frontiers. I'm just spitballing here, the possibilities are endless. Instead, we got Pirate Knuckles. But maybe I would be more forgiving if they at least did something with these concepts. Like, Sonic going to a pirate dimension sounds dumb, but you can make it work as long as you do something unique with the idea. They actually do this pretty well with New York City. The premise is that Green Hill has been taken over by Eggman and completely industrialized. However, there are 2 things that allow New York to stand out. First, the city visually looks amazing. They use alive reds and other similar colors for the city, like the red sky, the pink and yellow neon lights, and even the orange robots that patrol the streets. The colors stick out in your memory as visually pleasing, and yet despite that, the whole city is dark and filthy. All the fumes from the city have created a constant red sky where the sun never shines. Neon lights and signs decorate the buildings as if to try and hide how depressing this place is. And of course, being in Eggman City, there's tons of iconography and his likeness plastered everywhere. The second thing is that this world feels inhabited. Like, you have the Random Citizens and the Resistance, but you also have different robots and their functions like drones and trash bots. They even have cranes performing construction. They have conveyors, blimps, and a monorail. We even get a little bit of backstory with the city and how the Chaos Council runs the place, with each head receiving 1 district in the city to rule. Sonic merely showing up acts up security because he has no citizen record, showing how controlling the council really is. It's not like the most in-depth world building, but it's enough to make me want to see more. Like, we know that Green Hill has a beach, so wouldn't it be cool if New York had a docks where cargo ships go in and out of the city to deliver the supplies the city, or perhaps more so the council, need? And then you could have some fight scenes at the docks. Doesn't that sound cool? Sadly, my enthusiasm doesn't carry over to the other worlds. To put it bluntly, these worlds are dull and lifeless. There's absolutely nothing going on. Boss Cage Maze is a flat jungle that ignores all the fun, unique geography of Green Hill in favor of copy and pasted trees. No place is just plain terrible. It's literally nothing but water. And before one of you guys calls out the name, being self-aware that your world is empty doesn't make it better. That being said, I don't mind the Grim and Ghost Hill being lifeless because 1, that's the point, and 2, they aren't what the show markets. they primarily exist to serve a narrative purpose, while New York, Boss Cage Maze, and No Place are meant to be the thing that gets viewers interested in watching the show. They should have put their all into making sure these worlds were as appealing as possible, and yet out of the three, New York is the only one that actually succeeds at being a believable and compelling place. I don't get the sense that there's more to these worlds than we see, that there's more to be explored. I get the sense that someone went into a 3D modeling software, quickly threw some assets together, and called it a day. Like I said, if you want us to be invested in your show, give us a reason to care other than just telling us to. Also, can we just talk about how the Shatter Space makes absolutely no sense? Okay, so from what I can gather, the Paradox Prism controls what reality is and isn't. This would explain why Eggman is after the Prism and what he intends to do with it.
Just in time to watch me claim the Paradox Prism and transform your disgustingly green world into something more me.
Which is why when Sonic shatters the Prism, reality shatters, creating a series of new dimensions to correlate with each piece of the Paradox Prism. 5 shards, 5 worlds. So we could safely assume that the reality that we know doesn't exist anymore, because the gem that was keeping reality in one piece has been broken into several smaller realities. This would also make sense narratively. Sonic is a story of self-discovery. Sonic must learn what it truly means to be a friend, and by learning from his own friendships, help the Shatter variants improve their character. These fragmented versions of Sonic's friends are a result of his actions, and it's up to him to both figuratively and literally put everything back together by restoring the Paradox Prism and restoring his friendships. Are you following me so far? Good, because here's where things stop making sense. The first inconsistency is Ghost Hill, whose very existence makes my head hurt. So, the way it's described in the show is a gateway that's incomplete, or to paraphrase 9, a world stuck in the blueprint phase. It's clear that Ghost Hill isn't actually a new world, but the remnants of Green Hill. Not just because of the ghost-like figments of the Prime cast, but later we see 9 restore Ghost Hill to Green Hill for a moment, and yeah, these are our guys. We reconfirm this in the series finale when 9 uses the Paradox Prism to restore the other worlds, and Ghost Hill comes back as Green Hill, while the other worlds come back normally. If Ghost Hill is Green Hill, or more appropriately, is what remains of Green Hill, that would mean that the Shatter Spaces aren't really fragments of Green Hill, but are extensions of it. But they were still created by Sonic shattering the Paradox Prism. Things get even more confusing when 9 uses the Assembled Prism to work on the Grim, which ends up accelerating the decay of the Shatter Spaces, including the Grim. So, a nearly complete Prism breaks down the realities, but a complete Prism restores them? Next, can we just talk about Shadow? I've been dying to talk about Shadow. I swear, half of the plot holes in this show revolve around Shadow in some way. Probably because of how many loops the writers jump through to get him in and out of the show when the plot demands it. It's established in Season 2 that Shadow can't go through gateways, because, unlike Sonic and the other characters, he didn't get hit with the energy of the Prism. This prevents him from joining Sonic on his misadventures in the Shatter Spaces, and making it so that Shadow doesn't end the whole show in 3 episodes. Of course, this would keep Shadow locked outside the conflict, rendering him practically useless. So, the writers came up with a workaround by having it so that Shadow can't enter through the front of the gateways, but can enter through the side, because... Wait, what? Shadow doesn't have any Prism energy. Why is he able to go through? That doesn't make any sense. And no, the decaying of the Grim wouldn't allow him to enter through. He still needs Prism energy to enter. To go back to Season 2, how does Shadow know about 9's tech? He says as much himself that he can only see Sonic when he's running very fast. They try to explain this by poorly editing scenes of Sonic losing control of his speed with Shadow punching the gateways, which somehow means he was able to see 9 apply the stabilizers. But no, because we see later on in the same episode, Sonic loses the tech and his speed goes out of control without Shadow interfering. Also, how did Shadow get the Chaos Emerald back after losing it to the Void? Is it because of the world reset? Does Shadow remember anything? Actually, on the subject of the ending, what happened? Did the timeline reset? What happened to the other worlds? Do they still exist? Ian Flynn said that Prime wipes itself out, but Sonic still remembers everything. Is it just Sonic? Why is it only Sonic? Is it because he was all ghosty and stuff before he went through the gateway? Why the timeline reset? We saw 9 was able to restore the other Shatter Spaces along with Green Hill. Or was it just Green Hill that got reset and the other worlds are fine? Why are none of these questions answered? I put so much emphasis on the Shatterverse because it's supposed to be the whole appeal of the show, to see these beloved characters be put into settings that we as an audience aren't used to seeing them in. Going back to what I said earlier, the whole appeal of a multiverse story is to take the familiar and flip it on its head. Sonic Prime fails to establish the Prime cast in any meaningful way that would allow us to get attached to their characters, giving us a lack of familiarity. And rather than experimenting with any unique and fun ideas for Shatter Spaces, we get some of the most cliché, uninspired worlds you could think of. Add that with how the Shatterverse makes absolutely no logical sense, and you successfully failed at executing your show's very concept, inadvertently creating a show all about multiverses that fails at multiverses. I'm a strong believer in the power of good character writing. If you have well-written, interesting, and likable characters, you can make any story work, no matter how big or small the scope is. Audiences look for characters they can believe in and attach to. You can have a world as well thought out as J.R.R. Tolkien's Middle-earth, but if you don't have any compelling characters to live in that world, nobody's going to care. Unfortunately, Sonic Prime doesn't fare much better when it comes to character writing. First, there's the main guy himself, Sonic the Hedgehog.
I don't like it very much.
It's kind of hard to talk about Sonic's characterization when a huge part of why he's so annoying is something all the characters have, but I've gotta say it, man is this version of Sonic act really stupid. Like, being bright isn't a prominent trait Sonic has, but he's never been dumb. He had moments that showed he could be clever at times. Here, he's constantly screwing up at every chance he gets and making a fool out of himself. I would go into some examples, but it's such a constant that it would be pointless to pick out specific scenes. Well, okay, I'll give a couple examples. In episode 1 flashback, we see Sonic and Eggman battling near a canyon with Eggman dangerously close to the edge. Sonic stops attacking to have some banter with Eggman, which he responds by taunting him back. Tails notices how suspicious this is and does some readings on the mech, only to find out that Eggman isn't in the mech. So Tails goes to warn Sonic that it's a trap, and this happens.
It's a trap, Sonic! It's a trap!
I don't see a trap.
Sonic, what are you talking about? If there was a trap, you wouldn't likely be able to see it. What are you expecting, there to be a rope tied to a tree? Eggman is literally pulling a come at me bro while sitting at the edge of a cliff. How could it be more obvious what the trap is? In a later episode, Sonic gets sent to Boss Cage Maze after touching the shard in New York. To add some context in the previous episode, Sonic has just come to the revelation that New York was created by him breaking the Paradox Prism and shattering it into pieces.
And that's why everything's so whacked. But it's not that. Eggman didn't create this world. I shattered the Paradox Prism. I broke everything.
Anyways, Sonic touches the shard and gets sucked into it, being thrown out onto a wooden platform in the trees. Sonic observes that his environment has completely changed from an industrial city to an overgrown forest, and his gloves and shoes have changed, which had previously reacted to the energy of the world that Sonic was in, that being New York, changing his gloves and shoes. He also spots the scavengers, who look like his friends, but are instead dressed to look like jungle natives. Now, with all this information, you would think Sonic would come to the logical conclusion that he's now in another world. But no, it actually takes him a couple minutes to figure it out. I mean, it's not like Rebel and the Resistance suddenly changing into cavemen, treemen, whatever. It's not like your friends suddenly changing into jungle people would indicate that you're in another reality or anything. You could argue that Sonic immediately assuming he's in another world is an out-of-character explanation, and that it would make more sense for him to assume that he simply teleported. But teleportation wouldn't explain his gloves and shoes changing, and the fact that, again, his friends are now dressed like jungle people. Why wouldn't his first assumption be that he's in a new world? He touched a reality-bending rock and got sucked into it, only to pop through a portal from the sky. I mean, he already knows that reality was shattered because of him.
What part of our home doesn't exist anymore are you not understanding?
What did you just say?
What do you think I've been trying to tell you?
Wait, so you didn't know that reality was shattered? Then what did you mean by I created this world? As a last example, in Season 3, Sonic and Shadow are trying to escape Ghost Hill, which is collapsing, when Sonic stops to try and save the ghost holograms of his friends. Like, Dude, the whole world is falling apart and you want to try and save some ghosts. What the heck are you even going to do? Xiao even tries to snap him out of it and remind him that they aren't his real friends, but Sonic has the gall to push him away and continues staring like, what are you doing? I could go on, but I think you get the picture. Watch any episode of Sonic Prime and you'll be able to find at least 2 or 3 examples of Sonic being either slow to pick up on things, forgetting important information he already knew, or just not using his head. Again, it's not just Sonic, pretty much everyone in this show is a numbskull, but Sonic's the main character, so he gets special treatment. I also don't like how outwardly extroverted Sonic is portrayed here. He's extremely friendly and constantly reminding everyone of how much he loves his friends. Not to mention he's a chatterbox. This dude doesn't shut his mouth.
Ugh, you again? Let me guess, you're Grumpy Shadow. Although that would be redundant. Shadow who needs a shower. Sheriff Shadow of Floating Rock World. You guys are gonna feel really bad about this later when you think back and remember how awful you were treating me when I'm only trying to help. Let's just say, I'm glad I'm not you guys. That guilt's going to be unbearable. Ah, it's working! Yes! Ugh. Thanks for the heads up, Shadow. I knew that would work. No, you didn't. Did so. Whatever. Racy to Shadow, way ahead of you. Me. Us? All this water, it's just not natural. I always feel like something's gonna come up out of the darkness and... What is that? Everyone just calm down so I can stop my brain from exploding. No, 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 no! Ah! Now, a minute ago, we were battling robots in New York City, right? It's aiming away from us. That doesn't make any sense. Maybe they know when they're beat. These guys, please, if you believe that, then you're even dumber than you look.
Finally, a Sonic I can agree with.
One of Sonic's most consistent traits is that he's an overall chill guy who really only opens his mouth when he's bantering with Eggman. But here he just talks and talks and talks and he doesn't stop talking. Now I know what some of you might be saying. Random Kids TV, are you suggesting that Sonic shouldn't have flaws? That'd make him pretty boring if you ask me. And yeah, you've got the right idea, but this is not how you do it. A character's flaws should make sense within the context of how that character usually behaves. A better way of characterizing Sonic would be to have him act more or less like he did in Sad AM, a cocky teen with attitude who cares about his friends but is more focused on himself. Then, by the end, Sonic's been humbled by the events of the show and is now able to listen to his friends and appreciate them for who they are. Doesn't that work way better for the whole journey of self-discovery that the show is marketing? I'm not against having a more flawed Sonic. In fact, I prefer it. But it has to be in line with what we already know about the character. Also, don't make him annoying. That's a big one. Next, let's just talk about Shadow. He's kind of a mixed bag. To start off with some positives, I like how he isn't portrayed to be an egotistical jerk, but he shows empathy and is pretty level-headed. He's able to take the situation for how bad it is without being pessimistic. I think that's what makes Shadow such a cool character. Being serious, but not mean or apathetic. He shows genuine concern for Sonic after seeing that he might not make it after the transfer of his energy. I also think he's just the most relatable character as he doesn't tolerate any of Sonic's shenanigans, and he's the only one who makes any sense. 9 times out of 10, the guy is always right.
Let's destroy this traitor.
Wait, maybe I can reason with him.
Reason with him?
Yeah, I know, right? Man, I never knew we had so much in common. Unfortunately, that's where my compliments end, as while this Shadow is an improvement over the 2010s, there are still a few problems with his characterization. Mainly, he still portrays a loner who doesn't like having friends. While everyone else is shown hanging out and having a good time, Shadow's all on his own, lacking the company of Team Dark or anyone really. This is especially infuriating because Rouge is in the show, and yet she's shown hanging out with Sonic and co. Shadow doesn't even seem to care when she gets turned into a holographic ghost. I thought you guys were friends. Oh, sorry, Shadow isn't allowed to have friends. He outright calls her Sonic's friend, which just seems really cold to me. I don't get why Sega feels the need to make Shadow this emotionally distant jerk. Do they seriously think it makes him more appealing? All it does is make him unlikable and boring, removing everything that made him such a beloved character in the first place. Another problem I have with Shadow, and this is less to do with the character specifically and more so the writing, is that he's very underutilized. I already briefly touched on this earlier, but the writers keep trying to find excuses to write him out of the show. They teased Shadow so much in Season 1, only to get nothing out of it. Then when Season 2 rolls around, we actually get a whole episode with Shadow, only for him to be thrown to the wayside again. Then when the writers find their excuse to bring him back for Season 3, Shadow gets punched into a ravine and stays there for the next 3 episodes. It's ridiculous. They didn't even give a good reason as to why he wasn't helping out in the final battle. At least the whole can't travel through gateways thing was clever. Here, Shadow says he's been fighting robots this whole time and couldn't leave because he didn't have a Chaos Emerald, only for him and Sonic to run out of the ravine 5 seconds later. This show is gonna give me a migraine. Speaking of Chaos Emeralds, they do realize Shadow doesn't need one to use his Chaos powers, right? He could have just teleported out of that ravine the whole time. We've seen him perform Chaos Control in multiple games without a Chaos Emerald. And what about Chaos Spear? Chaos Blast? Those moves would have made for some really fun action scenes. It kind of feels like the people working on the show knew how powerful Shadow is, and so tried to find ways to nerf him and give him as little presence in the show's plot as possible. Which begs the question of why he's even in the show in the first place. If you genuinely don't know what to do with the character, then it's better to just cut them out of the story than to have them be there and do nothing. Because as it stands, Shadow is just a heap of wasted time. I honestly don't have much to say about the other Prime characters. As I said, the show gives us no time to get to know these guys, so they all just boil down to their stereotypes. He's the smart one. He's the tough one. She's the nice one. She's the sly one. Big Goat though, best character in the show. Oh, I guess Eggman's there too. He's fine, I guess. I don't get it. These guys were heavily marketed in the trailers and promotional material, Shadow especially, yet they're barely in the show. Why? But now let's talk about all of the new characters, starting off with the Chaos Council. There's a good video done by the PJ Show that breaks down all of the problems with these guys, which I recommend you go check out. Then again, you've probably already seen it if you're watching this video. But basically, the Chaos Council are not very good villains. First of all, did we really need 5 of these guys? Not only does it not make any sense why there would be 5 Eggmen in the New York dimension, but none in any of the others, it also devaluates the threat they would have if it was just one Eggman. This is supposed to be a world where Eggman finally won, but instead of having one who's far more imposing and cold-hearted, we get a bunch of absolute buffoons. It's hard to take these guys seriously because they're constantly played up for laughs, even though again, these are supposed to be the guys who won. How have the Resistance not overthrown these idiots yet? The poor guys have to use Nine's intelligence in order to get the upper hand with Sonic. Nine's the one who provides the technology that allows them to use the shards and is the one responsible for sparking the idea to create Chaos Sonic. And you know what? It wouldn't be that big of a problem if they were at least funny. But sadly, they fail at that too. Now I understand I'm not the target audience for a lot of this humor, but still, I did not find these guys to be all that funny. Most of their jokes revolve around their basic character traits, like the baby makes baby noises, the hipster is into yoga, the old guy is cranky. That's the joke, laugh now. And they just repeat these jokes over and over again, like these guys have apparently never heard the Rule of 3. Let's move on to 9. While Shadow is definitely my favorite character, I think 9 is the most well-written and interesting character. A Tails that grew up without Sonic is such an intriguing concept. We're so used to seeing these two as best buddies, so the idea of a Tails that is at odds with Sonic is quite engaging. In this world, 9 was bullied to the point of isolation, concealing himself in his lab and relying on his inventions and intellect. He doesn't want anyone to be able to hurt him again, so he chooses to be hostile to anyone he sees. 9 is cynical and arrogant. He looks down on others and constantly bewilders them because it's the only way he can live with his trauma. He has to lower other people's self-esteem in order to raise his. After all, no one can hurt you if you hurt them first. All this changes, however, when 9 meets Sonic. The idea that someone would not only be so nice to him, but want to be his friend, shakes him up and gets him to open up to Sonic. While he may claim he doesn't need anyone, deep down, all 9 wants is a friend. Which is why he takes Sonic to the Grim. Neo gave 9 nothing but hate and despair, so he wants to make a world where he could be happy. make his own paradise. But he also wants Sonic to be a part of his world, as the only person he's ever met to be kind to him. Sadly, this is where their ideas clash, as 9 wants to create a new world, while Sonic wants to restore the old one. Because of their different backgrounds, they're unable to understand each other. 9 can't understand why Sonic would be so attached to his old world because all of 9's life he lived in misery. And Sonic doesn't understand why 9 would want to throw everything away because from where he's from, life was perfect, so why get rid of it all? These differences, and more importantly, their incapability to compromise with one another, are what result in 9 betraying Sonic and taking all the shards for himself. However, 9's character takes a bit of a fumble once we get to his villain arc. After the betrayal, 9 starts behaving like a full-on supervillain. He constantly bewilders Sonic, threatens the lives of innocent people, and just acts like a total power freak. But right on Kids TV, didn't you say earlier that 9 is cynical and arrogant? Isn't that kind of in character for him? First of all, stop calling me that, my name is Mark. But secondly, yeah, 9 is a critical character who bewilders other people, but there was always a soft side to him. At the end of the day, he's just a kid who's hurt by how his world treated him and was simply returning the animosity he was given. But that more human side of 9 is completely removed in Season 3. He's just perfectly fine with killing people and committing mass murder. Oh, what, you don't remember that being in the show? Yeah, no, 9 definitely killed like thousands of innocent people in New York. Let's not pretend that gravity flip affected only 3 citizens. And all this for what? What's 9's reason for doing all of this? What is his end goal? Well, after assembling all the pieces of the prism together, 9 realizes it's still incomplete. It turns out there's a little bit of energy missing that Sonic absorbed when he shattered the prism. So he needs Sonic in order to finish the prism. So why is it that whenever Sonic shows up to the Grim, that instead of capturing Sonic, he sends out his robots to beat him up? How is that the most optimal strategy? You have practically unlimited power to create whatever you want. Why don't you create a giant pit that Sonic can't run out of, or just have all the robots focus on Sonic and overwhelm him? The answer? So we could get more cool robot fights. And this especially applies to the finale, where 9 just recycles the same army of robots over and over again. You'd think he'd try something else after seeing that his army keeps dying, but no. It sucks, because up until this point, 9 was one of the only characters that actually had a brain, but I guess even he couldn't escape from this show's bad writing. I honestly don't have much to say about the other characters. A lot of them just boil down to their single character trait, which isn't to say I don't like any of them, but it really is a case-by-case basis. Do you like rugged tough guys who have Brooklyn accents? They're probably gonna like Renegade Nux. Do you like pirates? Then you'll like Black Rose. Are you a furry? Then you'll like Mangy. That last one was a joke. I'm not saying every character has to be super fleshed out. Basic archetypes are fine. It's when the show tries to put a great amount of importance on these characters while simultaneously giving us nothing to work with and expecting us to be invested. Or, in other words, telling us to like these characters without giving us a reason to like them other than because the show said so. You like Sonic, right, kids? Well, look, Sonic likes these guys, so that means you should like them too. Take Rebel as an example. Her entire character is that she's the leader of a resistance that wants to take back their home and relieve oppression from the Chaos Council. Now, that isn't a bad starting point for her character, but that's all they do with her. And yet, she keeps showing up. She's always teaming up with Sonic and doing things, but her character never evolves. We've had strong female characters in roles of leadership in the Sonic series. Sally Acorn and Landland are great examples. But the difference is that they're actual characters. Landland takes her role very seriously and is strictly by the books, which sometimes leads to poor judgments. In reality, she has no idea how to lead a team, but she's determined to do her best. Sally, in contrast, is a lot more laid back and confident. She too once struggled with being a leader as she had to deal with the pressure of leading a resistance to stop Robotnik and being the princess of an entire kingdom. But she was able to find herself and lead the freedom fighters to victory. Wouldn't it have been that hard to give her a multi-episode arc where she messes up and starts doubting herself and her ability as a leader? You can have this heart-to-heart moment where Nux reminds her of all the victories they've had, all her best attributes, and how much of a friend she means to him. It could really show just how strong these two's friendship is. But we don't get that. We don't get anything. I think they tried to give her a character moment in Season 3 where she comes up with the plan to distract Nine while the scavengers sneak in to take the prism, but the plan ends up failing, so I don't get where they were going with that. Probably to pad out runtime. She doesn't even have any good character dynamics. She's supposed to be friends with Nux, but they literally have zero chemistry. They act more like associates than actual friends. That's another problem, is that no one has any good character dynamics outside the ones with Sonic. They try to have this sister trio with the Amy's in Season 3, but it comes off as incredibly forced. Like, I don't think Thorn has talked to these two up until now. They also try to give moments to other characters, but it's all too little too late. If they had chosen to make the show shorter and have it just focus on Sonic visiting new worlds every couple episodes, I think a lot of these characters would have worked, but with how long this show is, they really need to do more with these characters, aside making them fight robots. Now, I know what some of you might be wondering. Mark, why'd you spend 50 minutes and 43 seconds talking about the worlds and characters? These two aspects of the show are really important in getting the audience invested, because if you don't have any interesting or likable characters and don't have any well-done world building that they can buy into, then why should they care? This is why I find so much of the show to be so boring. I'm just not invested in Sonic's journey. Who cares if the Shatter Spaces are about to collapse? I'm just waiting for Sonic to go back to Green Hills so we can end this disaster. Speaking of that, let's talk about the finale. We've already covered the broad strokes and even some of the specifics, but there's still some stuff I would like to discuss. First off, the way the show chooses to resolve the conflict basically makes the whole battle completely pointless. In the last episode, Sonic and Nine's little fight brings them into Nine's base, where Sonic sees that Nine has set up a place for him to stay. It's here that Sonic finally realizes what Nine was trying to do. He didn't just want to make a new home for himself, he wanted to make a home for the both of them. This is the moment where Sonic completes his character arc, when he finally understands how he was taking Nine's friendship for granted, that he was being inconsiderate of Nine's feelings, and finally apologizes. There's just one problem with this. Sonic already knew what Nine was going to do. Nine told him directly that he wanted to make the Grim a home for both of them because being bullied all his life and living under a dictatorship were pretty depressing. And he said this twice. The first time was all the way back in Season 1 when Nine first brings Sonic to the Grim, and then he tells him again in the Season 2 finale. He literally explains to Sonic why he's betraying him, only for Sonic in the very next episode to question why Nine betrayed him.
We're not remaking your old world. We're building a better one. The perfect world in Grimm. Our clean slate.
You just assumed I'd go along with you no matter what. Did you even consider what I wanted?
Trust you? The only person I can trust is myself.
How could Nine betray us?
This is our protagonist, guys. The fact that this is how the writers chose to resolve the battle feels so insulting to anyone who has stuck around this long. Like, this would have been the perfect moment for Sonic to finally realize that all of this, the world's decaying, all the fighting, this was all his fault. He had the perfect opportunity to end things, but chose to fight instead. But no, all the blame is put on Nine, the kid who just wanted to be left alone. Sure, he helped escalate the situation, but Sonic is supposed to be the mature guy here. Why did he even choose to fight Nine? Sonic explained in the prior episode that this was all his fault and that he needed to fix this, which is correct. So why is it that in the next episode, all it takes to change his mind is his friends to say that they don't trust Nine? You trust Nine, don't you? Why does it matter what they say? They also need his expertise on the Paradox Prism in order to restore the Shatter Spaces. What are you guys gonna do once you get your hands on the Prism? You have no idea how to restore the worlds. It'd be one thing if Nine didn't agree to fix the other Shatter Spaces, but if everyone wins by cooperating with Nine, then this fight should have never happened. I can excuse everyone else wanting to fight Nine out of ignorance, but Sonic knows that the only way to fix the Shatterverse is for Nine to complete the Paradox Prism, which requires Sonic to give himself up. Why he suddenly changed his mind to go into battle against Nine is beyond me. Oh yeah, so we could get more robot action. For 3 full episodes. Everyone's made the same critique. The final battle is too long, it should have been 1 episode. However, I would like to make the argument that the final battle being long isn't the problem. Okay, well, it is, but it could have been avoided if they had chosen to make the fight more interesting. Other movies and TV shows have had long battles, and they're great. The fault of the final battle in Sonic Prime is a result of two problems: lack of investment and lack of variety. The first one should be pretty obvious. If there's no characters or stakes that I should care about, then of course I'm going to be bored. I've been recently watching through Dragon Ball Z Kai and finished up the Two Saiyans arc, or whatever it's called, where the show spends 8 episodes on one fight against Nappa and Vegeta. And yet, I was fully invested in the story. I actually gave a crap about what was happening because I had already got to know these characters and was invested. I did not shed one tear when Manji and Sales supposedly died. For one, because I knew the show wasn't actually going to kill them off, but also because I didn't care. Manji and Sales to me aren't characters, they're action figures. This is writing 101. If you fail to make your characters likable, endearing, or remotely interesting, your audience is not going to be invested in them or what's happening with them. Another problem is that the action itself, while well animated, feels very dull and bland. We spend 3 whole episodes punching the same robots, the same way, and the same location. This final battle could have been far more enjoyable if they had gotten more creative with the action set pieces instead of recycling the same crap. They literally do this same charging shot 3 times. Can you not come up with anything else? This is a franchise that, at least was, all about using the momentum of your environment to pull off cool tricks and get to places that you couldn't otherwise get to. Why don't Sonic and the other characters use their environment to fight off the robots in any creative ways? Like spin dashing off of a tilted pillar to get some air clearance. Why isn't there just more stuff in the Grim? Why add some cliffs and hills for them to interact with? Having them kill Nine's army the same way every time just gets boring really quickly. And it sucks because the action in this show is really well animated, but it can't save a bad script. You can't just shove in a bunch of action and expect people to be excited if they aren't already engaged in the plot. Am I saying that a shorter battle wouldn't have helped? No, but what I'm trying to get at is that the main problem with this fight is a lack of investment and too much repetitiveness, not length. Shortening the runtime would make the fight better, but not good. At best, we would have a finale that's okay. Then, when the fighting's over, we get one of the most rushed finales I have ever seen. I think the final episode has the opposite problem of the last 3. It really needed more time to wrap everything up. I really think if episodes 5 and 6 were instead used to conclude the story, it would have given the ending some room to breathe. First off, everyone makes nice with 9 way too quickly. Despite how many times the other characters made it clear how they didn't trust 9, now they suddenly do because this is the last episode and they need to wrap things up.
How can we trust them?
You can trust me. We have no choice. It all ends here if we don't.
I'm gonna give myself up. You guys are spared.
And let that villain 9 do whatever he wants with you? Not an option.
No one believes that Fox will keep his word.
Just another reminder that this fight shouldn't have happened. Then Sonic gets his prism energy drained into the Paradox Prism, and once the prism has been made whole, the Chaos Council makes their move and takes the prism for themselves. But since it's the last episode and there's no way they're gonna have another battle, the Chaos Council are dealt with quite easily. They start fighting amongst themselves and then they all get punched through a portal into the void. I felt like there was a missed opportunity to have a final showdown with the Chaos Council. This could have been their moment to show what they were truly capable of. But I guess once a joke, always a joke. 9 then tries to use the complete prism to restore all the other shatter spaces, including Green Hill. But oh no, the prism disappears for some reason. But it's okay because the shatter spaces end up getting restored anyways, including Green Hill. But without the prism energy to keep Sonic stable, he can't exist in the shatter spaces. So with the help of his friends, and Shadow, Sonic makes it back to his gateway just in time. Then we get a timeline reset back to the beginning of the show. Do I even need to explain why this is a bad thing? If we are to assume that the other shatter spaces don't exist anymore, then that would mean everything that happened, every conflict, every choice made, didn't matter at all. There's a reason why people hate stories where the whole conflict was just a dream or resets everything back to the status quo. These kinds of stories punish the audience for being invested at all by essentially telling them that what they just watched was a waste of time. Watching through these seasons for the first time, I was secretly hoping that I was wrong. That Sonic helping these people instead of fixing the prism was going to pay off. That these events did have a purpose besides telling a message. I thought they were going to pull some twist that restoring the prism wouldn't reset everything and the Shatter Spaces could coexist with Green Hill. And they kind of try to do that, but with the ending providing no closure for the other worlds, things are just left kind of vague. Regardless of the Shatterverse's fate, not giving us closure on any of the characters is the #1 way to kill your ending. Endings are supposed to give our characters, and even the broader world, time to reflect on everything, to give us their thoughts on the events that transpired, and to see how those events have changed their lives for the better or for worse. Sonic Prime doesn't do that at all. Sonic never reflects on the whole thing, we don't get Shadow's thoughts, he probably doesn't remember anything. We don't know what happened to the Resistance and Rusty Rose, the Scavengers, or the Pirates. We get nothing. Green Hill, the entire goal of Sonic's journey, we only spend 4 minutes there. That's barely any time for it to feel satisfying. You can tell they were trying to cram as much stuff into this last episode as possible, which is ironic considering how much the show drags its pacing. It's why spend so much time on action scenes? It literally costs more money to animate a bunch of fighting scenes than it does to write a quality script. If there was more story, it would also mean more emphasis on scenes with a lot of talking, which is significantly easier to animate. Yet they chose the lazy and more expensive route, and just had the finale, and the show in general, have tons of pointless action with very little plot. I already said this earlier, but you can't shove a bunch of action in audiences' faces and expect them to be invested if there is no reason to be invested other than because you said so. We watch movies and shows to be told a story. Well, no, I watch movies and shows for the action. To a certain extent, yes, we are watching to be entertained. But let me ask you this. What are some of your favorite shows of all time and why? What are some of your least favorite shows and why? Feel free to pause if you need time. If any of your answers had anything to do with characters, messages, or certain scenes that you either loved or hated, that's all writing. When I think of great movies, the first thing that comes to mind is How to Train Your Dragon, which not only has great animation, voice talent, direction, and score, but also great characters, a well thought out dragon mythos, and a great message about trying to fit in, and that just because you can't do things everyone else can do, doesn't make you weird. You have the ability to use the gifts given to you to change the world in ways no one could think of before. You may not be able to kill a dragon like everyone else, but you can do one better. Writing is what creates the backbone for movies and TV shows. Without it, you get stuff like Sonic Prime where everything feels hollow. Things like good animation and voice acting can enhance the show's quality, but it can't carry it. It frustrates me how lazy this finale is. I could come up with a better ending without getting paid. What, you don't believe me? Here's how I would have done it. In episode 4, Sonic, the Chaos Council, and everyone else fight Nine's robot army, and he loses. Then, the Chaos Council takes this opportunity to steal the prism and flee back to New York to start their galactic empire. Since this is only episode 4, they still have the mothership, and the Shatter Spaces are mostly intact. Sonic and Nine reconcile, and together with everyone else, they set out to stop the Council and take back the prism. In the next episode, our heroes take the fight to the Void in an attempt to take back the prism from the Chaos Council. But having almost unlimited power to create whatever they want, they prove to be admirable foes. Sonic and Nine come up with the idea to taunt them with who could make the best robot in hopes that they'd start fighting with each other, giving Nine enough time to sneak into the ship and steal the prism. This leaves them defenseless, and the other characters are able to take down the mothership. But uh-oh, the Shatter Spaces are starting to collapse one by one, and without their worlds, some of the characters start phasing in and out of reality. Sonic and I make a dash to the Grim, but the Council are pretty resilient, and after gearing up in their mechs, they go after them. The other characters stop them and try to keep the battle in the Void. Eventually, Nine starts to phase out of reality, and believing it's the end, he finally tells Sonic how much he means to him, and why he did the things he did. He just wanted a friend. He was afraid that after Sonic went back to his other friends, he would be all alone again. but Sonic reassures him that they will meet again, and like a true brother would, he carries Nine the rest of the way. They get to the tower, and with what little strength Nine has, he drains Sonic's prism energy and successfully restores the shatter spaces, bringing everyone back. Except now, Sonic's about to die, and so Nine and the others have to get him back to Green Hill before it's too late. Things would mostly play out the same here, except because everyone's in the void, Nine has to carry Sonic back to the others. Once they get to Black Rose's ship, they all say their goodbyes, and Shadow takes it from there. Then, we get a full episode in Green Hill to make the wait worth it. Sonic is able to properly make amends with his friends. He has a quick chat with Shadow and thanks him, to which Shadow reciprocates. We conclude the Shadow variant storylines of the Resistance taking back New York, the Council being thrown in jail, Thor and the Scavengers getting along in a healthier looking jungle, and Black Rose being the new pirate captain. Then, after some time has passed and Sonic and Tails are just hanging out in the workshop, a mysterious portal opens, revealing it to be none other than Nine. Sonic and Nine both embrace each other in a hug, and they're reunited once again. Obviously, this is a broad outline that I kind of came up with on the spot, so how well this translates into 3 24-minute episodes is up for debate. But I feel that a finale like this would have been far more satisfying, and who knows, it could have changed how people viewed the show. After all, the ending of a story is just as important as the beginning. It's the last impression you give your viewers before signing off. If only we lived in the timeline where the ending was good. So, originally, I wasn't planning on talking about the show's messages or themes because I didn't think there was enough to say that could warrant its own section. But just like with everything else in the show, the more I thought about it, the more problems I found. Plus, in a video claiming that Sonic Prime's story fails on a fundamental level, it would be pretty ignorant of me not to mention the core themes of the show. At its core, Sonic Prime's story is about friendship and learning to be selfless. In the show, Sonic is cocky and self-absorbed, focusing only on himself and, more often than not, takes his friends for granted, as he constantly gets them into worse situations, only to shrug it off in the end. After all, they always win in the end, and it's not like his friends can stay mad at him forever, so who cares? However, it's this mentality that leads to Sonic making the greatest mistake of his life. By shattering the Paradox Prism, he didn't just break reality, he broke his friendships. Sonic's friends warned him not to shatter the prism, only for him to ignore their advice and do it anyways. The consequences of this action are the shattered variants of Sonic's friends, who, in one way or another, are broken. The Shatterverse takes what were once positive traits of Sonic's friends, like Amy's love for nature, and corrupts them, making them angry, selfish, and isolated people. This mistake sets Sonic on a journey of self-discovery and redemption, as he not only has to restore the Paradox Prism, but also restore his friendships. In order to help the Shadow Variants become better people, Sonic too must become a better person and realize his own faults, eventually learning to put his friends before himself by making the ultimate sacrifice. Now, this is actually a really good moral to teach kids. It's important in any kind of relationship to be able to compromise with one's own wants in order to invest time in the other person's wants and needs, to ensure that that relationship stays healthy and continues to grow. If you focus only on yourself, your relationships are only going to sour, and eventually, you'll end up being all by yourself. Alright, then what's the problem with the show's messaging if the message is good? Simple. It's a lie. What I just got done telling you is what the show wants you to think it's about, but in reality, it's about nothing. Sonic Prime has no overarching theme, and as much as the show will try to convince you that it does, it doesn't. And here's why. Problem number 1. Sonic has nothing to learn. Despite Sonic supposedly needing to go on a character arc of learning to appreciate his friends, Sonic never goes on this arc because he already does. Remember that flashback scene of Sonic and Eggman fighting I used when discussing Sonic's lack of intelligence? The one where Tails tries to warn Sonic of Eggman's trap, which Sonic ignores. Well, after falling for said trap, because he's freaking stupid, Sonic shows up to Tails' lab to hang out, only to find Tails looking down. Sonic notices this and realizes that Tails is still upset about what happened earlier that day, and apologizes to him for not listening to his warning. This scene takes place in a flashback that happens in the very first episode. Why is this here? If the goal was to have Sonic to go on a character arc of realizing his faults, why would you have a flashback of Sonic realizing his faults and apologizing? Having this here essentially makes Sonic complete his arc before his arc was even supposed to begin. And this isn't just a one-off moment either. This is how Sonic normally behaves throughout the show. Sonic is almost constantly trying to help the people around him. He hypes them up and tries to encourage them to be their best, will always try to talk things out before resulting to violence, and will even set aside his goals at a moment's notice if someone's in trouble. At every step, Sonic's actions directly contradict the idea that he needs to go through a character arc about being a better friend. Sonic is the exact same person at the end of the show as he is at the beginning of the show. He never goes through any change because he never needed any change. So, rather than Sonic Prime showing you that Sonic needs to change, the show instead decides to just tell you that he does. I have never felt my intelligence be as insulted than with this show trying to gaslight me into believing that Sonic is a rash and uncaring person. Despite how nice Sonic is in this show, pretty much everyone is against him for one reason or another, with most of the reasons having nothing to do with Sonic. Characters will get mad at Sonic and blame him for stuff that either isn't his fault or is just straight up not true. A great example of this is in Season 1 when, after touching the New York shard and getting sent to Boss Cage Maze, Sonic finds another shard in that world and gets sent back to New York. As it turns out, time works differently in the many Shatter Spaces because while Sonic spent no less than a day in Boss Cage Maze, weeks have passed by in New York. And since he left the New York Resistance in quite a pickle, a majority of them deem Sonic as a traitor. But the thing is, Sonic's abandonment wasn't on purpose. Sonic didn't intend on leaving New York, or let alone being gone for weeks on end. Yet, despite this, Rebel and the others still deem him a traitor. Why? We do find out that Nine, who was in the room with Sonic, did make a getaway with the shard and left the others for dead, so did they assume Sonic left with Nine? But Sonic was never seen leaving the core, so why would they assume that Sonic and Nine left together if Nine was the only one seen to have escaped? Also, the whole time works differently in other worlds never gets brought up again. And this happens pretty much every time Sonic goes back to another Shatter Space. Sonic's friends will all be mad at him for just leaving them, even though every time he left, it was by complete accident. But Mark, you might be asking, they didn't know he left by accident. How could he be so hard on the other characters? Well, that's because these are meant to be the show's examples of Sonic being a flawed character. And you want to know why I know that? Because rather than sticking up for himself and telling the other characters to back off, Sonic apologizes for leaving them and puts all the blame on himself. Because Sonic is supposed to go on an arc of redemption, the show needs to have something that Sonic needs to redeem. After all, how could Sonic be so selfish as to abandon his own friends?
Am I sensing a negative vibe?
Using us to help you steal the shard, then deserting us as soon as you got what you came for? Yeah, I'd say the vibe is pretty negative. I should let the Chaos Council turn you into a handbag. Go on then. Don't let us slow you down.
You need to figure out a way to live, all of you, together!
What do you know about togetherness? You're a lousy traitor who abandoned your crew in battle.
We're overmatched.
We?
I left you all once, and I'm not making that mistake again.
You just assumed I'd go along with you no matter what. Did you even consider what I wanted? You just jump into situations with no idea about the outcome. You were only using me to get what you wanted. You tricked me. Clever. But betrayal comes easy to you.
This kind of forced drama is no more apparent than with Sonic's conflict with 9. Every time 9 has an opportunity to talk to Sonic in Season 3, he's always reminding him that he's rash and selfish. The example 9 uses the most to prove this point is the shattering of the prism. Let's break this scene down. While Sonic and his friends are fighting Eggman's badniks, Tails tells Sonic that they don't know what the prism is capable of and to be careful. Sonic runs up to Eggman as he's trying to take the prism out of the ground. Sonic rolls into a spin dash, and as he's doing this, his friends tell him to stop before the prism gets shattered, kicking off the events of the show. Did you notice anything off about that scene? Sonic's friends did a really poor job of warning him of the dangers. When Tails first warns Sonic, he even admits that they have no idea what the Paradox Prism can do. All they know is that it's a powerful gem, and that's it. Which really makes it no different from something like, say, the Chaos Emeralds, which are also powerful gems. So when Tails says to be careful, the warning comes off as incredibly vague. Does he mean to not break the prism, or to not get hurt while confronting Eggman? It isn't until Sonic is already set in motion to destroy the prism that his friends finally tell him to not do it. Like, you guys couldn't have done that earlier? Sonic was running for a good 10 seconds or so before he hit the prism, which could be interpreted as making the scene more dramatic, but even so, he was still running for a long time, and like, you guys really had to wait until he was in a spin dash to warn him? What was he supposed to do? He can't change his trajectory. Now, am I saying that Sonic shattering the prism isn't at all his fault? No. Sonic should have definitely aimed for Eggman and not the prism. Like, Sonic, what were you thinking? But it is Tails and the others' faults for not properly warning Sonic of the dangers of shattering the prism. And yet, this moment is treated not as an honest mistake, but as a horrible, unforgivable atrocity.
Home doesn't exist anymore. Because of you! I'm stuck in here. And it's all your fault, Sonic!
You said—
Sonic, you literally broke our world. Why would I trust you to do anything?
This is terrible!
Is it? That seems odd coming from you. As far as I can tell, you only care about your own home. You say it's because you're a hero, and that's what heroes do. But deep down, after what you did, destroying your own home, it's the only way you can ever live with yourself.
You broke the Paradox Prism. You broke our reality. Green Hill is gone. It doesn't exist anymore.
It's kind of ironic that in the show's attempt to make Sonic seem more like a jerk, it actually ends up making his friends the real jerks. I cannot tell you how many times I wanted to give Sonic's friends a punch to the face for all their unnecessary smack talk. Oh, you only help people because it's the only way you can live with yourself after destroying your own home. Shut up, 9! I have never seen a show try so hard to lie to its audience and fail so spectacularly to do so. The fact that Sonic Prime preferred to just gaslight everyone into believing that Sonic is going on a character arc, rather than put any effort into making that arc actually happen, is baffling to me. And I haven't even mentioned my second major problem with Sonic Prime's messaging, which is, number 2, the Shatterverse. As I addressed in my previous point, having it so that the other Shatter Spaces have to cease existence in order for things to go back to normal in Green Hill begs the question. What's the point in helping out anyone in the other worlds if none of it will matter in the end? If not to have Sonic go on a character arc, then what's the point? And that's just it. There is no point. Because there aren't any consequences to helping or not helping people in the Shatter Spaces, and because Sonic has no meaningful arc to go on, the result is that all the times when Sonic is trying to help the Shatter variants and sort out their problems, ends up feeling like filler. What should be these triumphant, heartfelt moments of Sonic learning to be a better person and becoming friends with the other Shatter variants, instead feels like padding to make the show longer, distractions to keep us away from the actual plot of collecting the shards and restoring the Paradox Prism. What's the point in helping the Resistance take back New York if that conflict won't be a problem once the prism is restored? Why help the scavengers reconcile if it ultimately means nothing in the end? What's the point in helping others if you'll never see the fruits of your labor? You see why this is such a problem to the show's message? Why would you write a story that's all about learning to be a good friend to people around you, and then proceed to create a world in which kind actions don't matter at all? It's bad when Shadow, who in this show is a loner who doesn't value friendship, is the most relatable character. This also makes the betrayal scene with 9 lose what little punch it had, because Sonic isn't doing anything wrong here. If anything, he's doing the right thing by trying to restore reality. Why is the show deem this as selfish on Sonic's part? Is he supposed to give the prism to 9 and let Green Hill remain broken? Dude, you can't both blame Sonic for breaking the prism and be mad at him for putting it back together. I am speechless. How did you guys mess up so badly that not even your story's message works? I have never seen a series fail this hard to tell an engaging story in my life. What a terrible show. So, there's a bit of an elephant in the room that I haven't addressed up until now. As most of you would know, Sonic Prime has been confirmed multiple times in interviews by the director, Logan McPherson, please let that be the right way to spell that name, that the show is canon to the Sonic games, which made quite a few fans mad. This is due to the fact that the show contains quite a few obvious contradictions that make it impossible for it to be canon. Stuff like everyone living in Green Hill or Sonic struggling with teamwork are just a few of the main examples. Ian Flynn, who was the main lore advisor for Sonic Prime, stated in one of the episodes of his podcast that a lot of the inconsistencies he tried to flag early on were usually considered, but rarely was anything done about them. And sometimes he was just flat out ignored. So despite Sonic Prime being canon, not much effort was put into making sure it would fit into the canon of the games, which got fans really angry. Here's the thing though, I don't really care. I think that this critique of the show has been way overblown. It's clear that the show being canon exists purely to get older fans to watch it. It's a marketing ploy. And if the people working on the show didn't care enough to make it consistent with the lore, then I don't see why we should take its canonicity all that seriously. To me, the main issue with Sonic Prime lies with the writing as a whole. Everything from the world building, to the characters, the dialogue, the pacing, the plot holes, it's all a result of bad writing. Heck, even the core message of the show is butchered. Sonic Prime is meant to be a story about Sonic learning to listen and work with his friends, putting their wants over his own. The show wants you to think that Sonic isn't a good friend, that he doesn't listen to his friends, is oblivious to their wants because he's too focused on himself. This is exemplified when 9 feels betrayed by Sonic because he assumed that 9 would simply follow along with whatever he wanted to do without considering what 9 wanted. But outside of that specific conflict, we see time and time again that Sonic actually does care about his friends, and is willing to listen to them and put his goals aside to help them. As early as Season 1, Sonic helps Thor and the Scavengers reconcile, teams with the Resistance to fight the Chaos Council, and he encourages Dredd to become a true pirate captain again. He could just as easily ignore their problems and make a bullet for the shards, but he doesn't, because he cares. Also, how is restoring Green Hill seen as a selfish motive? Sonic is solely responsible for the shattering of reality. Wouldn't the best thing be to restore that reality? But we're led to believe that he should have been focused on helping 9, even though, as Shadow correctly states, he isn't the real Tails. In any other context, Sonic would be justified in wanting to help the people around him. But because this is a multiverse story where the worlds will cease to exist once reality is made whole again, nothing that happens in these worlds matters because it's all going to be wiped out in the end. Not to mention this theme barely shows up in the show, further compounding how pointless this story feels. Look, I didn't make this video just to hate on Sonic. I love Sonic, but it's that love that makes me so critical of this show. Sonic is cool, and I want him to continue to be cool. but the show seems to be perfectly fine with settling for mediocrity, and that's never what Sonic has stood for. The point of this video was to show that Prime isn't just bad because it's canon, it's the writing that brings this show down. Stuff like the animation and voice acting are great, but that's supplementary to the story. It can't carry a show. I just don't want Sega to learn the wrong lesson that Sonic shows need to be more restricted in the future. And I also want fans to not be so focused on lore and iconography, and instead focus on whether or not the story was able to successfully execute its ideas. But, hey, maybe I'm overreacting. Sonic Prime confuses me. Not only do I question why they chose to make an entire show about the multiverse of all things, but I also have to ask, who is this made for? Obviously, it has to be made for kids due to how dumbed down the writing is, and just because Sonic is a brand that caters to a younger audience. But you kinda have to be an older fan to really care about what's going on, as the show gives you no time to get introduced to any of the other characters outside of Sonic. For being an entry point into Sonic the Hedgehog, it sucks. I think what's most disappointing isn't even the fact that the show is bad, but that we probably won't be getting another Sonic show for a while. The waits between shows usually span several years, with Sonic Prime coming out 5 years after the conclusion of Sonic Boom. So the idea that we'll have to wait another 5 years for the next show grieves me deeply. But hey, it's not all doom and gloom. We're getting Sonic Movie 3 this year, and I have no doubts that it will be great. The promise of a Sonic cinematic universe also sounds interesting. I'm a bit skeptical if they can pull that off, but hey, at least it means we're getting more shows based off of the movie characters. And I'm one of the few people who like the Knuckles show, so I'm gonna be eating well. Shadow Generations is also coming later this year, and while I'm not entirely sold on the gameplay, that Shadow Prologue looks like it's gonna be fire. Also, this is a perfect opportunity for me to play Generations, as I haven't yet, so I'm still gonna buy the game. Hi, Aaron Mark here. So, Shadow Generations it's been out for like, I don't know, probably a month at the time of this recording. It's good. The story is kind of just a rehash of Shadow the Hedgehog, but it's just like a lot better than Shadow the Hedgehog, so really no complaints there. My brothers will not stop screaming. And who's to say we'll have to wait long for a new Sonic show? Sonic is more popular than it ever was in the past 2 decades. So I'd be pretty surprised if we don't see another show in the next 2 years. Although, can we please not put some twist on it and just have the show be about Sonic and his friends going on misadventures? People like Sonic's world. Let's stay there next time. But I guess to summarize, Sonic Prime had potential to be really good, and in some aspects, it did succeed. The animation is amazing, and the voice cast, Devin Mack especially, did a stellar job. But the show is so void of any interesting characters, stakes, or even an overarching theme that it just makes the show feel pointless. Instead of fleshing out its premise with interesting worlds and characters, the show opts instead to pad out the runtime with endless action scenes that go on for way too long. Will kids enjoy it? Absolutely. And for being a kids show, it's not the worst thing in the world. I guess I was just hoping for something more than a mindless action cartoon was all. But what do you think? Let me know down in the comments below what your thoughts are on the show and whether or not you agree with my points. But this is a random video that I hope you enjoyed. Peace out.
Number 1, 2, 3, 4.